Okay, hello. I hope that everyone has had a brilliant day at Communicate today. A huge thank you to all of our speakers and chairs, and everyone who's taken part in the discussions and asking questions and making comments. It's been fantastic to have so much interaction that I've witnessed during the day. And as you heard throughout the day, this year's theme is amplifying awareness and focusing action. And today we've been taking a deep dive into putting nature at the heart of conversation. So it's great to bring everyone back together, and we're really delighted to welcome Lucy Hodson to share some final thoughts with us. Lucy's known right across social media, posting as Lucy Lapwing, and has been spotted on Spring Watch, Autumn Watch, Radio 3, and across YouTube. Welcome, Lucy. Just to say, we'll be putting a couple of polls out during this session. Look out for those. Look for the chat function as well, but any questions, please put in the Q&A session as well. So Lucy, great to have you back to Communicate after a couple of years. What's been keeping you busy in nature this season?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to see everyone again, and yeah, to hear all the good stuff going on. What's been keeping me busy is a very big question. I imagine it's a lot of the similar things that have been keeping many of us busy in the wider nature and environmental sector. It's obviously been a really chaotic, can I say, interesting, busy and unpredictable couple of years. And yeah, I think even in the last couple of months or so, just the kind of political turmoil that we've seen in numerous ways. But, you know, so many different kind of, it's almost been the perfect storm of specific political events and changes in legislation and proposed new policy and just all sorts of things that have kind of created this perfect storm that seem to amount to this attack on nature, as it's being referred to across the sector. So myself as kind of a campaigner and communicator, I've been very busy kind of, yeah, wading through all of that, but also just trying to kind of ground myself and keep a little bit of joy and keep that little wild spark of excitement alive and interacting with nature. It's been, yeah, an interesting one.
Right. Yeah, and I think that will resonate with a lot of people who are here actually participating as well. It sounds very familiar. So we've got this theme, amplifying awareness and focusing action. How well do you think the sector is doing at amplifying awareness and focusing action? I don't know if you want to answer them separately or together.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, that, and I thought a really good question. Because I mean, it's such a broad topic, isn't it? So I think in terms of amplifying awareness, I think there's lots of really, really specific examples of both individuals and organizations that are doing exciting, brilliant, innovative, unusual methods of communication to help get, you know, whether it's a specific issue across to do with a certain habitat or a certain species, or whether it's just general communication about the issues at hand. I think there's some really brilliant examples where people put in not just fire and passion, but imagination and creativity into it. I'm thinking of some examples that I've seen, perhaps, I mean, quite recently, WWT's meme game has been on fire. It's been brilliant. There's been some really good memes coming out. And there's been some really, you know, good examples of particularly young people taking to platforms like TikToks and Instagram Reels to kind of communicate these issues with humor and with just in a relatable, informal fashion. So I think whilst there's really good examples, we do also know that the internet is such a busy place. It's just, the noise is deafening. Deafening is an English term, shouldn't use that. The noise is overwhelming quite a lot on a lot of social media platforms in terms of how much information we're each presented with every single day. I think there's some studies that show, you know, the equivalent, if we were computers, in how many gigabytes of data that would be a day, is something really quite scary in terms of how much information we're absorbing, whether it be through our feeds of social media, whether it be through traditional news, whether it be through tellies, radio. So I think in terms of amplifying our messaging and getting it through, cutting through the noise is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And I think one of the best tools that we can use and that we've got, and something that I try and emulate in a lot of my work, is to just not necessarily fall for feeding the machine, but to just share information and causes with passion and authenticity and joy and excitement. Because if you can share something with true human emotion, I think it's much more likely to reach the emotional being that's on the receiving end. We're all humans with feelings, and we can all feel those things when it radiates. So I think, you know, by cutting through the kind of the mess, and just getting back to those kind of true emotions is something that's yeah, could be done really well. Focusing action is a whole other thing, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about physical action. What kind of action do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what kinds of action, I mean, I think one of the things that's emerged in a couple of the other sessions is the action on the ground versus the action trying to get the system change, and which you mentioned obviously as well in terms of policy and change. So I think probably both areas of action are interesting, aren't they?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And obviously we're in very interesting times at the moment where we're seeing, in terms of action, in terms of activism, it's obviously very interesting. We've got people like Just Stop Oil, we've got road closures, we've got various people gluing themselves to various things and timber suits all over the place. And then we've got kind of that kind of that level of influence and activism going on at such a level of, you know, political persuasion and advocacy and that kind of thing. Again, these issues are so huge. If we're talking about both the climate emergency and biodiversity emergency, often these two issues are discussed in silos, as separate issues that aren't really interlinked, whereas I'm sure, as we all know here, they are inextricably linked and connected. So yeah, it's an interesting one to think about how we as a sector focus that action. And I think, yeah, I think collaboration and setting differences aside is something that goes down really well, especially with the general public. And we've seen examples of a lot of the bigger NGOs working together in recent weeks over that attack on nature kind of discussion that I was talking about before. And I think when people can see that people can unite under a common cause and work together, I think it does help focus that. So yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, sorry.
Collective action, yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, you've mentioned sort of joy a couple of times, and that's really interesting. And there was a session earlier on comedy and climate change. But sort of there's the serious side as well, obviously. And I'm just wondering where you think the sector could be, where it could be bolder or more courageous.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like bold and courageous things. I think it comes down to very similar things. Again, it's there's always a place for professionalism, and those serious discussions and the correct tone of voice for the situation. But I do think quite often the environmental sector and kind of nature charity sector can, by default, almost see itself starting to imitate, if that's the right word, or aspire towards these corporate ideals of how we should behave in the workplace, if that's the right way to say it. How we find ourselves kind of pursuing that direction of yeah, just very formal, very professional, very I mean, if we're talking about comedy, there's a really good, I don't know how much longer Twitter will be around for at the moment, but there's a really good profile on there that's called, I won't swear, but it's SHIT, Non-Profits Day. And it's kind of a poking fun at large non-profits that have become so big that they kind of almost imitate that kind of corporate sector, large, serious style communication. Whereas perhaps we've almost lost and moved away from our original reason of being, which is activism. And I know activism is a very loaded word because especially now it conjures those images of throwing soup and gluing yourself to things. But a lot of the larger organizations, people like the RSPB, people like the National Trust, people like Wildlife Trust and other organizations all had those roots in kind of ground level grassroots protest and activism. And I think, yeah, I think in terms of being pointier, in terms of being bolder, in terms of being yeah, more courageous, being honest, being truly honest. There's a lot of tiptoeing around, you know, if a policy decision's made that perhaps going to affect a certain area or affect your habitat or affect outcomes for tree planting, whatever it might be. I think the sector in the past has perhaps, you know, lent into that kind of media speak and very formal speak, whereas I've seen recently some of the announcements to do with, for example, the retaining EU laws bill, or to do with investment zones and that kind of policy announcement that immediately has quite obvious potential implications for wildlife. I've seen a lot of organizations use really quite pokey language, using words like angry, furious, you know, these things that immediately tell you exactly what, as a collective group, they think about it. So yeah, I think that kind of thing is good. It's good to see.
Yeah. And I guess people might say it's easy for Lucy Lapwing to be brave, but actually what you've said is there are examples of, and actually maybe it isn't, you know, if you can correct that, but what you're saying is there are plenty of examples of larger organizations doing it as well.
Yes, definitely. And you can, you know, I of course I can say this, I am an individual, and I'm talking, you know, of myself, and I have opinions on things, but I think, you know, we're in a society now where, you know, we are watched. Everything that we say and do is watched on social media. So if you as an organization put out a statement, we've seen this in the last, you know, couple of years or so, whenever there's been any kind of statement on any kind of social justice change or movement or policy direction within an organization, perhaps it's to get more Black people and people of color involved in nature, perhaps it's an announcement on attendance to a pride event or anything like that. Criticism immediately is kind of loaded upon organizations. You get a lot of abuse, you get a lot of very critical language. It can be really scary, and I especially feel for individuals working in teams that have to deal with those comms. But we are so scared of criticism, even when our principles should be very, very firm, and we, you know, we shouldn't be scared to have confidence in saying, no, this is the right thing. You might not be happy about it, and so be it, but this is the direction we're taking. And I think that goes to say that whether it's a social justice issue or whether it's, you know, another policy direction.
Interesting, yes. Or maybe, given that there will be, there could be some consequences, maybe it's feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes, my mom says, yeah, do it scared.
Cool. All right. Well, you've obviously had great success in inspiring audiences on social media. We've seen that, those of us who followed your channels. Overall, do you think social media has impacted environmental communication sector for the better or for the worse?
Ooh, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be an overall picture, because I think, without wanting to sound too much like Bo Burnham, it has been a decade of experimentation, basically, especially on young brains. Social media has been largely uncontrolled, it's been unregulated, and it has been unleashed upon us without any consultation. From a very young age, I started using social media, and I'm going to show my age now, back when I was on MySpace, when I was a teenager. And so I would have been, what, 14, 15? And so for me, my most developmental years, to have been exposed to the world and all of its good and bad things, that's only a drop in the ocean compared to what children and young people are exposed to today. So there's the impact of that on people's day-to-day lives. So this is a very kind of tangent way around of me getting to a point, sorry. The fact that children and young people have screens from the get-go means that that will impact surely on a lot of their time as children, in terms of their playtime, their free time, their exploration time, and their learning time. So whereas I, as a child, had a telly and watched that, I had parents that would make me play outside all the time. So I was exposed to the natural environment. Although I didn't know what the birds were, I didn't know what the wildlife was, you know, I knew what frogs were. I'd play with wood lice and that kind of thing. I was outside and I was experiencing it. So you've got this kind of issue now where, yes, children might be being exposed to environmental education on social media, but it's still through a screen. So it's quite a difficult one. But I think in terms of the actual sector, and there's this amazing community online, you know, that sounds quite a little bit like a conspiracy theory and quite kind of scary, but, you know, there are brain chemistry implications to a decade or so of heavy social media use that, you know, since we've really started doing it. But in terms of kind of the other side of it and the positives as I see it, when I started using social media myself personally and started blogging under my name, Lucy Lapwing, I felt very alone. There was no one. I remember, you know, thoroughly searching, trying to find other young people that were into nature, and I couldn't find anyone on Instagram. I felt like a weirdo. But over time, people have found each other and connected each other, and this community's grown. And it's just the most heartwarming, joyful thing. And for me to think that there are young people who are teenagers out there who are interested in wildlife, whether they're an aspiring entomologist or a bird watcher or anything, they're just vaguely interested in wildlife. And the fact that they could go on a device and see that even if they get absolutely rinsed for it at school, that there's other people out there who, I'm not saying I'm like cool, but like I'm normal enough. And a lot of us, you know, we take the mick, we talk very informally, as I was saying, it's all comedy, it's all kind of, I don't know, fun and joyful. So I think there's that positivity for me. And myself, you know, even over the last few years, as that community's grown and grown, then meeting people in real life who I've just known off the internet for 4 years. Like, I went to a couple of events earlier this summer and ended up in tears holding people's hands and hugging them, because it's someone who I've spoken to through a DM box on Instagram for 5 years and never knew what their face was like, but I've shared joy and love and laughs with them and then met them in real life. So there's pluses and minuses, and I would be minded not to, you know, necessarily categorize it as better and worse. And I think everybody's experience of the internet is different, isn't it? So yeah.
Yes. No, it's like all the questions I think we deal with in communicate. It's a bit more nuanced, isn't it, than just a yes or no. I did wonder, because you use different channels, don't you? I mean, I know you primarily as Instagram, but I've seen you on Twitter. And do you do TikTok or anything as well?
I feel like I'm too old for TikTok.
I just
I
wondered
don't know. I think. Sorry, carry on.
I just wondered if you see a difference between the different channels, you know, in terms of whether things are going better or worse.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Oh, absolutely. So I quit Facebook in 2019 because I was sick of seeing my racist relatives argue about Brexit. So that's what Facebook had become for me, was a place to see family members arguing about politics, and I just wasn't into it. So I'm not present on Facebook. Twitter, I call the argument machine because it's just where strangers go for arguing about things. But there is a corner of joy and it's wonderful. But I do find that Twitter's where I go to see people's takes on any developments or debates within the sector, and try and share a little bit of joy in there as well. Instagram for me is a safe space relatively, because I've curated a space in there. I've chosen who to follow and who not to follow in terms of who brings me joy and who brings positivity. And I find it's a platform where, particularly young people in the sector, it's not a space for competition. It's not about, well, what are they doing? You know, they're my competitor. It's about, yes, you go, girl. You're writing some amazing stuff about nature, and I'm going to amplify that. So I find that all different. TikTok, I've not really delved into because I just try and work at what medium I'm best at, and video takes a lot of time, and I'm so busy that I just haven't had time to do it. So,
well,
maybe
there's some really interesting things. So I too have been hesitating to jump onto TikTok because I feel too old, but there's some really interesting comments coming through in the chat. So Jasmine says, no one is too old for TikTok. And then I think that's a kind of laughing emoji. Someone says TikTok can be, Alice, sorry, says TikTok can be for everyone. But also quite a bit of agreement with you, Lucy. So people saying that Instagram does feel perhaps more positive than some of the others. So sharing my passion for nature, my work, and connecting with other like-minded people, which is pretty much what you've described as well, isn't it? So
yeah.
So yeah, I think, and the other thing is the polls seems to have come back generally actually saying it's better on the whole. So that's interesting. So people here are relatively positive about. I mean, obviously, the poll we had was a pretty black and white choice. So people didn't have the luxury of the discussion we've had. So yeah, there's some interesting comments coming back, and also observation of the different kinds of people who are on social media. So Stephen Bledhill said that over the last 12 months, seeing meteorologists and weather forecasters have been speaking much more authoritatively about climate change and what it looks like and what to expect, and with credibility and in the public arena. So that platform, you said that when you were young, obviously it was a platform for you, but I guess it just shows, some of the comments show the breadth of the kinds of people who are able to talk on social media.
Yes, definitely, yeah, and exactly it. People find their own niches and their own means of communicating. I mean, I like to write about stuff because it helps me, especially about nature and wildlife. It helps me process what I've seen. If I've seen a really cool slug, then I can like process my experience with that slug by writing about it. But other people can make, you know, all different types of art, like visual art, like, you know, traditional visual art. Some people make videos, and that's what TikTok is. It can be an art form of making videos. It's absolutely wonderful. And we've got all of these different options of creating stuff. So yeah, I think finding your own kind of platform and your own way of doing it, I think, I mean, you know, there's so much turmoil at the moment. The whole Twitter thing is just mad. It's just, it goes to show how precarious the entire system is, that we've built entire sectors around now. I mean, like every single organization has a comms department and social media executive and all of this. And a madman with $44 billion can come and just potentially destroy it. Something that, you know, we've created over like 10 years. So yeah, I think we've just got to be prepared as a sector to be flexible and just be ready to kind of create, I hate using the word create content, but be able to spread our message and share that kind of love and the passion and the reason why we're here through whatever tools we can. Because the internet, let's just face it, the internet can totally go down, and even Zoom can be a thing. So yeah, no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I promise.
No. I've just seen another interesting comment. Be interesting to get your reflections on, Lucy. Katie says, do you think it's because with Instagram you're connected primarily with like-minded people? Some of the other channels, I mean, people say all social media can be a bit of a bubble or an echo chamber, but do you think maybe there's an interesting challenge there between the more enjoyable, nicer, safer spaces that perhaps are talking to more like-minded people? If you want to reach beyond the engaged, perhaps you have to, is there a sort of risk of a less pleasant and enjoyable experience?
Yes, 100%. I think, yeah, I see this argument about echo chambers a lot, and I see it. I recognize that is a thing. I operate in an echo chamber. The UK nature communicating people is a small bubble, let's face it. You know, we are minuscule and tiny, but I think it's a very easy trap to fall into, to think I've got to be the biggest and the best and have the most followers and get the most engagement on my content and, you know, get all the likes because I need to reach everyone with this message, because it's unrealistic, and you end up diluting those messages a lot. I think your strongest influence of circle of influence is the closest people to you as well. So it's kind of spreading that joy immediately within your family and friendship circles and work circles has a really great influence. I mean, we see people who have huge followings online, huge followings. I'm thinking of an example. The Emu Girl. So does anybody know who I'm talking about when I say the Emu Girl? There's two Emu Girls, but one of the Emu Girls is somebody that created a huge following on TikTok about this emu that she's got on a farm that she looks after. But it's her level of communication has since spiraled out of control, in that the emu farm that she works on has sadly been hit by avian flu. And it's now a problem that she's communicating, showing herself kind of cuddling and kissing an emu that's infected with avian flu, which is obviously against every single guideline to do with virus treatment. So although she's got this huge following, and you could argue that she's doing a lot for nature conservation because she's talking about rescuing emus, it's kind of like, how big do you let that get before you've kind of lost the message and you're now influencing people with something that's wrong and potentially dangerous? Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just looking because now there are so many interesting comments and questions coming through. I don't think we're going to get through them. I'm going to ask you one question, and then we've got one more question to ask you. So 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to wrap up very soon. So Hetty says, the main thing that, this is quite flattering, so get ready, Lucy. The main thing that stands out about your content for me, and the main reason I love following you, is the unbridled joy you bring to every post. Joy about nature, wildlife, planting, and wildlife-scape. So I'm reading out word for word because it's nicely written. So, but the question is, to what extent is that, you know, to what is it conscious, and how much work does it take, and to what extent does it just come naturally? Have you found that that's just evolved over time?
I think it's natural. It sounds like I'm bragging, doesn't it? That's really lovely. Sorry, by the way. Thank you. Who said that? Thank you to whoever that was. Sorry, I didn't see your name in the chat. Hetty, thank you so much. I find that when you connect with any person face to face, largely, unless there's something wrong and they're, you know, sad and angry. You can get that joy out of anyone. We can all get excited about stuff. We can. And if you go to any toddler or any child that's been exposed to wildlife and hasn't yet got the fear, if I go to them and get really excited with a frog, oh my God, they're going to lose their mind, because it's in all of us. Especially when it comes to nature, it's in all of us. You know, I don't have this passion about anything else in my life, because I think the passion around that nature is the most important thing. It's everything. The natural world, it's just everything. And I think it's a fundamental part of human nature to feel that joy and connection with it. So for me, I am so desperate and so eco-anxious and terrified, let's be honest, and I'm not very skilled in terms of things like, I'm not a natural scientist, I can't really handle data, I'm awful at maths, I'm not very practical, I'm a bit clumsy, and I'll probably like chop my hand off if I try and do any practical conservation work. Something that I can do is talk and be excited about stuff, and I think so many people have that. It's not even a skill, it's just a character, just who you are. And that's the, you know, if I think about all of the things that have made me change my behavior or think differently or grow as a person or evolve, it's always passion and emotion. And I think it's just the most useful tool that we have, and we can be shamed into kind of calming down, being serious and be professional, or we could just use the most important tool we've got, which is excitement and love and joy. And I'm aware these sound like wishy-washy terms, because they are traditionally very feminine qualities and terms that have been, you know, looked down upon, but I defy anyone to not feel them at least sometimes about some things. And I think nature is one of the best things that we can do to communicate that.
I think that's wonderful, and I hope that I fear you might be right, they're seen as the way you describe the feminine, look downwards, but I hope they're not. I hope we're moving to a place where they're not, because that was a lovely kind of description of what we should be doing, I think. Okay, there's just time for just going to read out something someone's put. Becca has said, this was from earlier on actually, but it's just interesting, that social media can mean that for those of us who aren't able to access nature as easily, we can still connect with nature via social media. So I thought that was an interesting observation from one of the participants to share. I don't know whether if you have time you can answer that, and also the final question, which is, if you were to leave us today with a challenge or a provocation, what would it be? I think you've given us quite a few already, but
you cut out on halfway through Becca's point, so I feel like I can't answer that because I didn't.
Okay, sorry.
But in terms of a challenge or a provocation, oh God, that's hard. And now I can see that we've only got 2 minutes left, so I need to think fast. I think one thing, we're in such a scary time. We're in such a time of so much information overload, so much scary, terrifying news, so much empathy. Like if you're a feeling empathetic person, which most people are, to read in the news on a daily basis about other people suffering and people having a bad, you know, bad existence and discrimination and climate change, you know, wreaking havoc around the world. All of these things make you just feel sorrow and panic if you're anything like me, and sadness and fear. I think just radiating out into the world with all of your communication work with kindness, understanding, softness and gentleness, like just wonderful. Even to those idiots on social media that are trying, even to, you know, anything. I think sharing the joy, sharing the excitement, I think it's just the best thing you can do. And I think the world just needs as much of it as it can.
That's great. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing to leave us with. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lucy. That was absolutely, I can tell also by the comments, by the way, that are coming in, that people have really engaged and enjoyed this. So thank you very much. We do have to close there. I'm sure, well, yes, looking at the conversation, we could have kept going much longer. But I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who's taken part today. Don't forget, Communicate continues online tomorrow, November the 16th, and all the tickets for online work on both days. So join us back here on the same link from 10 AM tomorrow, where we'll be exploring winning back our audiences. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.